Okay, hello, and welcome everyone to what is going to be the first and probably only part to this commentary on Final Fantasy IX. I'm kind of just doing this for fun, just to do it to, get familiar with all the recording programs, all the audio stuff, get some use out of my microphone, all that jazz. So I decided to do just a fun commentary, just give my thoughts, give my feelings over one of my personal favorite games of all time, Final Fantasy IX, for the PS1. So I don't have anything written down. I don't have anything planned or anything. I mean, I have some points in my head that I'm certainly going to address, but I don't have anything written down for this. I'm just sort of winging it as I go. But I've played this game so many times and I'm so familiar with it that that should really not be an issue. I can just go on and on and on about this game forever. So let's just jump right into it. This is the opening cutscene. I'm not going to just narrate what's going on. I'll start with my history. I first played Final Fantasy IX because my brother owned the game. And as far as I remember, I got to, for anyone familiar with the game, I got to Gizmalk's Grotto. And I kept losing to the boss, and then I just gave up. And that anyone who knows this game, that's not very far in. And that was about when I was in middle school, or maybe even elementary school, I'm not entirely sure. But I picked the game up many years later, and I absolutely just loved it. I fell in love with this game. I played it through all the way. It was, I don't know if it was the first, or it was one of the first Final Fantasies I ever beat, next to 7. Because, I mean, a lot of the Final Fantasies are really before my time. I mean, 6 came out in 94. I wasn't even born yet, so 6 games into the series, I wasn't even alive. But I've played every Final Fantasy to date. I haven't beaten them all. I've beaten most of them. I just haven't beaten 2 and 3. I've beaten 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Haven't beaten 10, 2, or 12. Barely played 13. But I am a big fan of the series. And this is my personal favorite of the current 13. I mean, I guess you can count 13-2 and Lightning Returns, whatever, but the current 13 main mother, or whatever the word is, mainline titles. 15's coming out soon. I don't know. I don't have a PS4, so I'll be able to play that for a little bit. But I'm rambling. Let's talk about Final Fantasy IX. So right now, this is just the opening cutscene with the credits and our main character right there, Zidane. Dissidia calls him Zidane for some reason, but I've always referred to him as Zidane. It probably always will. I'm a little stuck in my ways in that regard, but excuse me. Sure is dark. So Final Fantasy IX, yeah. Personally, a lot of people consider this to be like the hipster choice for your favorite Final Fantasy. I would think 6 is probably the hipster choice, quote unquote. I mean, 7 is the most famous in the series and most popular. For good reason, it's a great game, but 9 has always been my personal favorite. I feel that it's aged visually a lot better than 7. I mean, obviously this looks bad by, modern standards, with games like The Witcher 3 coming out. I mean, actually that game just was in some hot water recently for some graphical stuff, but, when you got games like Final Fantasy 15 come out, we see how good that looks. I mean, this looks pretty bad in comparison, but this is a far more stylized game. It goes back to so here's some history on Final Fantasy IX. Final Fantasy IX is like one giant love letter to the Final Fantasy series up to this point. So it has references upon references upon references to the previous 8 Final Fantasy games. It has tons of other, just like I said, it's just one big love letter. It's just tons of references, tons of, things that longtime fans of the series will recognize, and it's sort of a game that you want to feel comfortable playing when you play it as a longtime Final Fantasy fan. I'm kind of stumbling over my words here because not a lot's happening right now. This is the first battle in the game. I'll have more to talk about as we move on, but right around here, this is just the first fight in the game. You fight against Baku, who's wearing his little dragon thing. I tried doing some stealing, but the steal rate in this game is actually abysmally low, unfortunately, so later in the game, when only Zidane is in your party as the only thief, stealing some really powerful items can be a bit annoying because it takes forever. And there we go. Dragon helmet is split open, and Baku is revealed. So, let's get into the story of this game. I'm going to assume Well, I don't know if I should assume that. Either way, I'm going to not go into full spoiler territory, but I'll say a few things here and there. But Zidane is part of the traveling band of thieves known as Tantalus. Their leader right here, Baku, with the other 4 members. At least these are the members that have story significance. And there are other members to Tantalus that don't really matter that much. They're sort of just other random NPCs that you can talk to. But, you know, the main members of Tantalus being Baku, Zidane, Blank, Cinna, and Marcus. And we are headed to the kingdom of Alexandria to kidnap the princess of Alexandria, Garnet. Yep, to kidnap the heir to the throne. So Cinna's going to take it from here. So, yeah, kidnap the princess. Yeah. So they are a traveling band of thieves. Tantalus is, but they also, I mean, their cover is that they disguise themselves as a traveling play group. You know, they put on performances for all the cities. They do all these kinds of things. You know, I mean, they're going to be doing the play I Want to Be Your Canary, so that they can sort of put up a cover while in the background the main thieves go and kidnap the princess. Whatever for is never really explained. I mean, who knows? They're probably for a ransom or something like that. In any case, that is what we know so far. The main, the thieving band Tantalus is going to kidnap Princess Garnet. This is Vivi. This is basically the first reference you can really see in Final Fantasy IX to the previous series. Vivi's design, he's a black mage. For anyone unaware, black mages are the types of mages who use offensive magic, fire, ice, lightning, you know, poison, all these types of things, offensive magic. And Vivi's design is a huge throwback to what the original, you know, black mage design was in the first Final Fantasy. In the first Final Fantasy, there weren't really any characters. There weren't really, you know, for the Final Fantasy for the NES, that is. There weren't really any characters. It wasn't, you know, the story was just that you play as the 4 warriors of light, and you control the classes, you know, knight, thief, white mage, black mage, red mage, blue mage, you know, ninja, samurai, all these types of things. And that is what the original black mage class looked like. And since you could just name any character whatever you wanted, you know, Vivi is just a big throwback to what that looks like. So he is literally a black mage. Whereas before, the black mages looked exactly like he did. I mean, if you could just Google image black mage and you'll see what I'm talking about. Except that's how Vivi actually looks. Before, like in Final Fantasy 1, that's kind of just an outfit they wear. So here we are in Alexandria. One thing I want to say about this game is that I already talked about its graphical fidelity and things like that, but its aesthetics are just, it's amazing aesthetically. Like, this game looks like a painting. Like, for all intents and purposes, it looks like a painting. You know, just got the question marks there, checking out the menu. I mean, the amount of work that went into designing the backgrounds, the cutscenes, the CG, the levels. I mean, all the areas in the game is just amazing. It's one of the more stylized games in the series, where, you know, Final Fantasy VIII is a little less stylized because the characters are more proportional. I mean, you can see everyone here. Everyone kind of looks like a little person. I mean, their proportions are not what we would consider to be normal in our, you know, time. But Final Fantasy IX goes back to a way more, you know, a fantasy quote-unquote setting, whereas games like 6, 7, and 8 were far more technology based, like giant robots, giant mechs, you know, guns, and all this technology, like flying metallic airships, things like this. 9 goes back to a much more, you know, traditional steampunk setting, a more, you know, fantasy kind of like knights and sorcerers setting that hadn't really been seen in the series for quite a bit. I mean, since 6. I mean, you know, all Final Fantasy games, you know, share things in common. They're all part of the same series. So there's always going to be magic. There's always going to be swords and knights and all these things. But 9 goes back to a time where, you know, it was far more, you know, it made a lot more sense for people to still be using swords in combat. Whereas in 7, it's like, well, Cloud uses the Buster Sword, but there's also tons of people who use guns. So it almost seems impractical for him using a sword when there are guns and grenade launchers and rocket launchers available to him. Whereas none of those things exist in 9. So yeah, just like you can tell what I'm saying when I just say the game is like a painting. It's really just a beautiful game, aesthetically speaking. Again, the graphics haven't aged as well, but I mean, aged better than 7. I'll tell you that much. 7 is just polygons and squares. I mean, that's what the characters are basically made up of. things like that. Yeah, but right now we're playing as Vivi, who is one of the main cast, obviously. Right now, he's trying to get a ticket to see the play I Want to Be Your Canary. So here I'm just going to explore a bit. I mean, the amount of detail you can just see that goes into these backgrounds. You know, it seems like such a commonplace thing in games nowadays, since games are so much like... I mean, they look so much better now, but, you know, just all these little things where it's like you can see people standing there and, you know, you can, if you look very slightly, you can see the way the smith is standing there. He's sort of up and down, you know, the breathing, his you know, his breath, and he's going up and down, and you can see the waving of the flags, and, you know, all these little details that just sort of add all this flavor to the world. It's really amazing what they're able to do. I mean, this is sort of a part of a bigger topic, but games are just such a huge collaborative effort that it's almost like it's almost crazy to think that they get made at all because of how many hours and how much goes into a game. I mean, and this is a game from 2000. I mean, imagine a game nowadays. It's millions and millions and millions of dollars to make these big AAA games. I mean, a lot of them that aren't even that good because it seems like devs aren't putting the money to the right kind of thing. But, you know, all too often games are attributed to like one person when in reality there's such a huge collaborative effort. It requires the work of artists and programmers and designers and all these other things to really make a game what it is. So, you know, on that topic, I mean, the Final Fantasy series was conceived by Hironobu Sakaguchi. You know, he is the main guy who made the series. For anyone who doesn't know, it's called Final Fantasy, the series that is, because Sakaguchi was working at Squaresoft at the time, or just Square. Man, back in the 80s, he was making games for, I don't even know, the NES or maybe even the DOS or something like that. But Square was going under. The company was failing financially, and Sakaguchi had one more chance to make a game that was going to be a financial hit. So his final game, it was his Final Fantasy. That's how the series name came about. And when Final Fantasy 1 was released, it was a critical success, and it kept Square from going under. So he just kept making the games. I mean, so there's a little history lesson of why it's called Final Fantasy. And, you know, there's like I said, there's 13 mainline games in the series so far. I mean, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10-2 being the first sequel to, or being the first direct sequel to a game. Then there's 11, which was an MMO for the PS2. Then there's 12, 13, the two sequels for 13. 14 again is an MMO. Now 15 is coming out. And that doesn't even count all the other side games like FF Tactics or Crystal Chronicles or the movies or all these other things that are related to the Final Fantasy series. But, I mean, this series is just so huge and so expansive. And the thing is that every game is different. You know, Final Fantasy 1 and Final Fantasy 2 2 is not a sequel to 1. 3 is not a sequel to 2. 4 is not a sequel to 3. They're all their own contained stories. And while, yes, they all have references to each other because they're all part of the same series, it's kind of like Zelda in that none of the games are directly related in a sense. I mean, you know, there's always going to be the hero of time and stuff like that. But, you know, the Link from Wind Waker is not like the son of Link from Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask. I mean, those are the same Link, but you know what I mean. They're not direct sequels. 10-2 was the first direct sequel to a Final Fantasy game. You know, that's why they call it 10-2, not 11, because people were going to get confused. So yeah, every game is its own contained story. And Final Fantasy IX, like I stated earlier, is a big love letter to the series. It's one of the last games Sakaguchi directly worked on, you know, in terms of designing and, you know, the story and things like that, where he later on, he left it to different people. I believe the guy who directed this game was Hiroyuki Ito, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm not going to look it up. But Sakaguchi, this is the last game he really had a big part in. Excuse me. So just to talk about what's going on screen, this is Puck. It says Rat Kid, but he's going to tell us his name in a second. This is Puck, and this is Vivi. And right now we're trying to sneak into the play of I Want to Be Your Canary. So yeah, I'm just keeping all the default names for all the characters. I don't know if I'm going to do more recordings of this game. I mean, this is a long game, so I don't know if I'd really be up for it. I just wanted to do this just for fun, but yeah, right now we're just sort of sneaking into the castle. We're sneaking in and doing all these things and yada, yada, yada. So we've snuck into the castle. We're going to watch I Want to Be Your Canary. So let's talk about a few other things. You can't mention Final Fantasy without mentioning the music by Nobuo Uematsu. The man is a genius. The amount of music he pumps out, it seems like, because Final Fantasy games used to be coming out at a far greater rate than they do nowadays, but he would write an entirely new, musical soundtrack, an entirely new score, an entirely new everything for every single game. And keep in mind, he didn't do it. He doesn't. Well, I should be more clear. He hasn't done every single game up to 9. So the first 1 through 9, he solo composed all the music. 10, he had some help with some other composers, and then he started to as sort of the old guard of the Final Fantasy series. So Sakaguchi and Nobuo Uematsu and Hiroyuki Ito, those guys, as they moved on and started doing other things, and they passed it on to what is generally considered the new guard, which sort of came into being around Final Fantasy VII. Nobuo Uematsu, that is, passed on, composing duties to other composers. I believe the composer for 12 was Hitoshi Sakimoto. Don't quote me on that. I actually think that is right, actually. But, I mean, when you stop and think about how much music this guy's made for the series, it's almost hard to believe. But yeah, the music in Final Fantasy IX is no exception. It's amazing. Personally, I think that's the thing. I think it's one of the weaker soundtracks in the game, but it's still amazing, which is just a testament to how good Uematsu is at what he does. So here we have the play going on. So that's Baku, if you couldn't figure it out by the build or the ears or whatever. He's dressed up, and they're going to be performing I Want to Be Your Canary in front of Queen Braun, who was that rather hefty lady we saw sitting in the chair there. So let's just talk about the in-game world of Final Fantasy IX a bit, because I've been really talking about the series more than I have this game individually. So one thing this game is really great at is world building. I mean, you can just once you get some free time and to get a break from the story, you can go around, you can find all these hidden memos, or all these notebook entries, or all these types of things, and you can really just learn about the world and things like that. But I mean, I'm kind of drawing a blank here. Sorry, I don't do this very often, but yeah, this is just the play. This is going to be one of I believe it's the second fight we do in the entire game. There's a few more things I want to talk about. I'm going to save them for later. Right now, this is just the cutscene for what's going on. All the topics I want to talk about appear a little later into the game, or into this video, but yeah, so we're about to do a fight here. I'll just talk about it now. So one thing that Final Fantasy IX does really great is this thing called gameplay story integration. So what is gameplay story integration? Well, it's a bit self-explanatory. It's when you integrate gameplay and story. Well, to people who may not play a lot of video games, or just may not be familiar with the concept, I'll break it down. So games, essentially, there's gameplay. That's the thing you do as you hold the controller and you control the character. Like what I'm doing right now, this is gameplay. Every menu menu choice is me choosing it. Everything we see in the game is happening because I will it to do so. Then there's story, which is what you progress through to get through from the beginning of the game to the end of the game. Story is usually shown through cutscenes, but story can also be shown in other ways, instead of overtly through like a cutscene and things like that. One great example of story not being shown overtly through a cutscene is Metroid Prime. For anyone who's played Metroid Prime, the story is not like, oh, this happens, it's not someone just, wall of text going on the screen. This happens, then this happened, then this happened. No. To really understand the story of Metroid Prime, it's a very atmospheric game, and it's a very quiet game, almost. You have to go around, you have to find all the logs, you have to scan everything, which makes a lot of sense for the setting, Talon 4, because it's a world that has essentially been deserted. I mean, who's going to be there to tell you the story? Samus has to figure out everything that's going on herself. So you go around and you find all these things. Final Fantasy IX is very similar. While the storytelling is much more overt in a sense, in that, there's cutscenes like this to tell us what's going on, there's a lot of stuff you can find out about the world to, really flesh it out. Great world building in this game. This is a song I absolutely adore. I'm going to mess up its pronunciation so bad, but it's called Vamal El Flanco or something like that. So, yeah, this is all just part of the play that's going on. But the main example of gameplay story integration I was going to show, this is an example coming up right here, but I was going to show, I'll talk about it more later, but back to what I was saying is that when you integrate gameplay and story, that means you're fully taking advantage of the medium of video games. Because what are video games? They're meant to be interactive. What is a movie? A movie is passive. You don't get to decide what goes on in a movie. What's a TV show or a book? Those are all passive activities because you don't get to decide. Oh, by the way, I've never gotten a perfect in this minigame before, and I did it my first try recording, so yay me. But, you know, movies and books and TV shows, they're all passive activities. They're all great. There's so many great things that come out of movies, books, TV shows, etc. But you're not in control of them. You don't have a say in what goes on. And while to an extent that's true in video games, not all video games, it's some, because, at the end of the day, there's going to be a certain number of outcomes, like in a game like the Stanley Parable. At the end of the day, as many endings as that game has, you're still limited by the number of endings. But that doesn't change the fact that it's all interactive, and if you want, you could play the game in a way that you only get one ending, and that's it, and then you don't play the game anymore. That's seems like kind of a waste of money, but it's still an option. You know, games are meant to be games are not meant to be. They are an interactive medium. You know, they're meant to step into the world and take control of what's happening. You know, things like that. And while yes, I may be controlling a character, Zidane, in this case of a Final Fantasy game or something like that, plenty of games like MMOs or games like Mass Effect where you can create your own character, or Dragon Age, or like BioWare games in general a lot, or like Skyrim and things like that, where you can create your own character and really just do what you want to do. And while Final Fantasy really, the mainline series at least, isn't really about, you know, inserting yourself, quote unquote, into the story, it also kind of is, because at the end of the day, this is still Zidane. This is still Zidane's story, and this is still, you know, the same thing is going to happen every time I play the game. But one of the very minute, you know, subtle things you can do that you can always do in a game, and especially in Final Fantasy, things like that, is you can change the character name. Since there's no voice acting in the game doesn't have to worry about saying, you know, your voice, like Liam. First time I ever played this game, instead of Zidane, it was Liam. And the second time I made it, instead of Zidane, it was Liam. So it's kind of like you're inserting yourself in the world. It's a very interesting experience, which is really something this game takes advantage of, the medium of video games. Oh, thought something was coming down. I'll get to the bigger example of gameplay story integration when it comes up. But right now, this is Zidane. He's dressed up like a knight of Pluto, and this is the princess, if you haven't noticed. So I'll get into some other stuff. I said this game is chock full of references, so one reference right here. The way Garnet is dressed right there is a reference to the original outfit of the White Mage class, that is, from the original Final Fantasy series. What's going on here? We're about to be introduced to Zorn and Thorn. Yes, this is also another great musical track who... his name is escaping me. I'll actually look it up. Zorn and Thorn theme. It's like Gestures of the Court or something like that. Theme. Gestures of the Moon. So, these guys are antagonists, if you can really figure it out. The way they talk is actually quite amusing. Another thing that Final Fantasy does really well, or I should say Final Fantasy IX, that is, does really well, is that this is really the first game in the series to get for all intents and purposes, a perfect translation. For anyone who's played, you know, any of the games before this, 8 was the first in the series to get like a really good translation, but 9 was basically the perfect one. It got a perfect translation for all intents and purposes because it got dialects right. It got all these types of things correctly. Whereas one of the most famous mistranslations in the series is from 7, where you walk up to that guy in the little tube and it says "I are sick" or something like that. Oh no, this guy are sick is what Eris says to Cloud. But yeah, I'm rambling. I'm going to talk more about Final Fantasy IX. So we're in the Kingdom of Alexandria right now. One thing that I'm going to stop saying that because it's getting a little dumb at this point. But I almost said it again. Alexandria is different from a lot of kingdoms in fantasy. Alexandria is a matriarchy in that the women rule. This is the queen. The queen is ruled by a single queen. The top general, Beatrix, as we see on the right there, is the top commanding military officer. All the soldiers in Alexandria are female. The only exceptions are Steiner and his Knights of Pluto. But other than that, Alexandria is a matriarchy. It's not really fully explained whether it was always that way or whether it became that way after the king died, because we know the king died like something like 15 years ago or something like that. or maybe earlier or later. I'm not entirely sure. But the king died, and since then, or maybe it's always been the way, who knows, Alexandria is a matriarchy. Another thing that Final Fantasy IX has abundant is the references to the number 9, which seems a bit of an odd thing to put in the game. It almost seems random even, but I mean, I'm trying to think of some examples. The most obvious example is that Steiner is the captain of the Knights of Pluto, Pluto the ninth planet from the sun, and there are 9 knights in the Knights of Pluto. This is Final Fantasy IX. There, I can just look these things up. References to 9 in... So here's on the Final Fantasy Wiki, it's just a list of illusions and things like that. I'm just going to find the part where it says the number 9. Right now, Steiner is just looking for his Knights of Pluto. I mean, you get like a bonus or something, you find them all. I'm not going to do that just to advance the plot. I know exactly where we're supposed to go. You just have to go to this tower. And then you'll trigger a cutscene. So while he's doing that, let's see. Allusions to the number 9. So, yeah, Knights of Pluto. There are numerous boats, airships, and war machines in the game, but only 9 carry names. Regent Cid is the 9th. Regent Cid Fabul is the 9th Cid in the Lindblom's lineage. What else is going on? These are kind of... I'm going to stop this. Oh, Zidane's birthday is September, the 9th month of the year. Lots of stuff. You can look these up things. You can look these things up on your own, but... So yeah, we're just going to the top of this tower to trigger a cutscene. So this is Steiner. Steiner's a really interesting character in that he's kind of like a sweetheart, but he's also very stubborn. He's like a perfect knight in a sense. He really just cares about his duty. He cares about his loyalty and his duty to the princess to protect her, which is what he has to do. He's very good intentioned, but he's also very stubborn, and he's also very he's also comic relief in a lot of cases because he doesn't seem to pick up on a lot of social cues because he thinks, he kind of has a one-track mind, protect the princess, so he's not able to really pick up when people are being sarcastic towards him. Here's a facial. I love that face he makes. But Steiner is, he's well-intentioned, and Zidane is now chasing after Garnet, who just seems to be having the time of her life flying through the air like that. We'll find out soon enough that Garnet, indeed, this is a good part. Steiner's really trying his hardest, and then he misses, and right into the wall. Oh, poor Steiner. He tries so hard. That scene always gets me. But yeah, so talking a little more about the characters. Garnet is is she the 9th princess? I wouldn't be surprised. I never actually looked it up, but yeah. So Garnet is trying to escape from the capital, or the castle Alexandria, while Zidane is trying to kidnap her. However, neither of this know this. Neither of them know what the other wants. Garnet knows she's trying to be kidnapped, but Zidane doesn't know that she wants to be kidnapped. As we're about to find out, they are going to, tell each other their stories, and they're going to work together. Talking about Zidane a bit, you'll notice he has a tail. I mean, you'll have to play the game to find out why, but spoiler. But one thing that's true about Zidane's character is Zidane is a total flirt. He hits on every girl he sees. He's a flirt. I mean, there's not much else you can say about it. He knows all the girls in all the cities. He's met them all. He's probably made out with them all. I don't know. It's never really implied that he does anything more than hits on girls. Wish I could go really deep into say, it's his defense mechanism for not knowing about his identity. He's the boy with the tail. Why does he have a tail? All these things, which I'm not going to go into, because you should play the game because it's an amazing game. So yeah, she is now asking to be kidnapped. Yeah, the truth is that I am actually to Alexandria's heir to the throne of Alexandria. I have a favor I wish to ask of you. And Zidane, being completely taken off guard here, is like, wait, what? Hold on, I didn't know what's going on here. So they decide to work together. They decide to get Garnet out of here. Yes, I shall hereby do my best to kidnap you. And there's Cinna. I totally just blanked out on what I was going to say. But I'll just keep talking. He washes up every morning. The humor in this game is pretty good, I'd say. I mean, none of the Final Fantasy games are outright funny. I mean, they're not really supposed to be. They're supposed to be stories, heart-wrenching, just my heart stories, sad, glad. I feel like I have to burp. Hold on. Oh, excuse me. Princess. So Steiner's made his way. If you haven't figured that, by the way, that is not one of his Knights of Pluto. That is actually Blank, a member of Tantalus, who's that guy who's complaining how smelly his armor was. So yeah, we're going to be getting up to another section of the game that I'm going to be talking about soon. What's my time at? Wow, 30 minutes already gone by. Jesus. Okay, so let's see, they all jump through the hole, blah, blah, blah. I'll go first, sir. Whoa. I'm stuck. What do you think you're doing? Captain, sir, I'm stuck, sir. Blast it! Says Blank. I mean, not much going on screen right now. They're just making their escape. But, let's see. I talked about, okay, I'll go into this. I talked about all the references the series has. Final Fantasy 9, and you can find this, you can Google this for yourself. That's what I'm going to be using, Google allusions. There are so many allusions to other games and references and things like that to other games in the series, which if you haven't figured it out, I've said that a million times by now. But let's just go a little more in depth. Let's do a references to 7 because that is the most popular in the series. Let's see. Is there anything pertaining on screen to our reference right now? Probably not. We're about to fight Steiner though, so let's see. Oh, this is the part I want to talk about. Okay. Wait, no, it isn't. Nope. Garnet's not in this party right now. Let's see. Let's see. Blah, 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 blah. So Trance first appeared. Trance is not going to be appearing. Blah, blah, blah. Screw it. I'm going to leave it up. Wow, that's some pretty bad commentary on my part, I gotta say. So yeah, there's a fight going on here right now. Just beating up on Steiner. One thing about Final Fantasy IX is I don't know, it's not the hardest game in the series. It's probably not the easiest either. One of the easiest games in the series that I played is probably 6, but this game is probably harder than 6, probably easier than like 10. I don't know if 10 was that hard either, but I mean, I've played it, but I mean, Final Fantasy games difficulty is usually pretty even across the series. I mean, there are no exceptionally hard games that I can think of off the top of my head. So, yes, Oglops appear, and now they're bouncing all over the place. And we're going to go up on stage now so we can fool. Let's see what's going on here. Cornelia. So, yeah, the play's still going on despite all the antics that have been happening in the background. And Marcus is brought out. And there's little panels on the floor in front of him is where we're going to appear in a sec. My poor Marcus. Hark, lad, no matter how much thou dost treasure Cornelia, no matter how deeply she might believe she doth love thee. Oh, so sad. Never shall I see her marry a peasant such as thee. When the bell strikes 3, under the axe thou shalt be. No, Marcus. So yeah. Cutscene, cutscene, cutscene. We cannot go any further. Zidane, get on number 2. Okay, Princess Garnet, this way. I guess I don't know, I guess now's as good a time as any. I mean, Final Fantasy IX may be a game that I cherish dearly and a game that I love so much, but it is not without flaw. One of the biggest flaws of this game is just that not all of the story is explained in the game itself. A lot of it is explained in, like, supplementary material that was released after the game's release. So, like, you know, there's, like, a book. I forget what it's called, but it's, like, a book pertaining to this game that explains a lot of the story aspects. I mean, the story by itself is still very understandable, but there are certain aspects that are missing. I cannot remember what that book is called. Either way, they are now improvising because Queen Brahne is still watching. And they need to put on a show. Steiner, however, looks entirely, you know, starstruck. I mean, actually, that's not the word. Like a deer in headlights. He doesn't understand what's going on. He's suddenly on a stage in front of thousands of people, in front of the Queen, who, you know, he swears to protect, but he does not know what's going on because he was just chasing people, and all of a sudden, the princess is acting, you know, in a play. So he doesn't get what's going on. That's really just Steiner in a nutshell. He's good at his heart, but he's kind of got a one-track mind. He doesn't, really think a lot about anything other than protecting the princess and the queen. And he seems to, this really just shows that. He thinks Garnet was actually just stabbed there, when in actuality it was, pretend. And then, what have I done? Am I never to hear her loving voice? Am I cursed never again to feel her soft touch? Oh, cruel fate, thou hast robbed me of all I hold dear, yada yada. And he stabs himself. It's kind of Romeo and Juliet-esque. This year's so splendid. And this sort of just, if you can't figure it out at this point, Queen Braun is an antagonist. She is a bad guy. She's not the main bad guy, but she's one of them. It kind of just shows how she's Mother of the Year and that she can't even recognize that her own daughter is on stage. The daughter that she is looking for is on stage right in front of her, doing a play. And now we see Vivi and Puck again, who had snuck in. Vivi trips once again. And we go on. Ah, yes, finally the part that I want to continue talking about in regards to gameplay story integration. Because that is just one thing Final Fantasy IX does so well. Even though I said I would stop saying that. So they're just being chased around, yada yada. Everything's being ruined. Vivi shows off his ability to use black magic and casts fire. Garnet throws the thing off. Zidane, it's time. What is going on? Steiner, don't follow me anymore. So Steiner's conflicted here. It's a direct order from the princess, but if he doesn't follow her, her life could be in danger. So he must. He cannot comply. Let's ditch Sir Rust-a-Lot. Here's also Zidane's character in a nutshell. Zidane is a flirt. Zidane is a thief, but he's also a good person. He always puts others before himself. He saw Vivi on the ground, someone he had never met before, someone he didn't know at all. But he also saw that didn't matter. He saw that someone was in trouble and someone needed help, so he went to go help them. And that's really Zidane's character in a nutshell. So here's the fight I was talking about. This fight is an amazing example of gameplay story integration. And what I mean by that is that Garnet is now in the team for this fight. Garnet is the white mage. Now, I'm going to put it in terms it's pretty easy to understand. You cannot lose this fight. And the reason is that Steiner, even though he will attack Zidane, he will attack Vivi, he will attack Marcus, he will never attack Garnet. Because Garnet is the princess and he is her knight. He has to protect her. You can't protect someone when you're hitting them. That's not how it works. So the only way to lose this battle is to lose it by inflicting self-damage, because you can have your characters hit each other, but that is the only way to lose this fight. You have to lose this fight on purpose to lose it, because in the story it does not make sense for Steiner to attack Garnet. He is the captain of the knights who is sworn to protect her. So in the gameplay he doesn't attack her either, because the story and the game are mixed together. Gameplay story integration. And there's plenty of examples of that in many games, not just this game. I mean, I say many games, I can't even think of another example off the top of my head, but that's not important. Another great example of gameplay story integration in this game is that, without going into spoilers, at a certain point in the game, Garnet becomes a mute. Let's just say a tragic event happened and she becomes a mute, and that's how she deals with, that's how she copes with it. So during that time, while Garnet is in your party, during the period of the time where in the story she is a mute, she will often, not only she's a mute because she's having, she's very conflicted internally. She's having a really hard time because of the events that happen. So if you try and cast magic with Garnet during that time of the story where she is a mute, because of all, the stuff that happened within the story that, got her to that point, she will sometimes fail to cast magic because it will say Garnet can't concentrate. Because even though she's in a battle, her feelings for whatever, I'm trying to be as vague as possible here, her feelings for what happened during the story, which caused her to become a mute, essentially make it impossible for her to concentrate on battles, and she will sometimes fail to cast spells. Just another great example of gameplay story integration. This is another example right here. It's not, this is more scripted than anything, but it's a minor example. For those who don't know, that is a bomb. That is a recurring enemy in the Final Fantasy series, in that if you hit the bomb with a physical attack, the bomb will grow in size, and after 3 hits it will explode, killing itself, but also dealing damage to your party, which at low levels can wipe your party out, so you want to usually avoid killing those things with physical attacks. So the bomb is right behind Steiner. You can't hit the bomb. The bomb is just going to blow up by itself, and I think I take this battle a little slow because I wanted to see the little blurbs of dialogue that they show up through here. They're going to say, like, Zane's going to say something like, look behind you, because clearly there's a bomb right behind him. Yeah, hey, look behind you. And Steiner's like, I'll not fall for such an old trick. Yeah, it'll be happening. There it is. I'll not fall for such an old trick. So again, I mean, there aren't many fights like this in the game where there's a few, but not many fights like this in the game where something in the background that is, I mean, you're really just on a time limit. You can't really beat Steiner here. I don't know if whether the number of hits you do on Steiner is what causes the bomb to grow, or if it just happens every time it's Steiner's turn or something like that. But the bomb just grows in size, and eventually Steiner's going to figure it out. It's a bomb. And then Steiner says it again, which I didn't know it was an old trick to say it's a bomb, because he says, right up here in a sec, it's going to blow. Yeah. I'll not fall for such an old trick. I didn't realize it was just an old trick to say it's a bomb, it's going to blow. That doesn't seem like something really. That doesn't seem like an old trick to me. It seems like, oh shit, move, and the bomb is there. So now the fight ends. Oh, I can't believe I forgot to bring this up. One of the other references to the old Final Fantasy games is this is going to be a little more. You're kind of have to play the games to understand what I'm talking about. But for every game up to 7, every battle starts like this, with that bass line or that beat or whatever to start the battle up, and then the melody comes in, which is obviously different for every game. But that's how the battle always starts. It's become iconic, like the ending theme, ba 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 ba, or even like the theme in Zelda when you get an item, da 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 da. Those sounds have become synonymous with the series, just sort of like that opening theme. Well, 7 was the first game in this series to sort of ditch that. Instead of going da na 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 na, it goes ba 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 ba. And again, if you want to see what I'm talking about, just search like Final Fantasy's 5, 6 battle theme, then search Final Fantasy 7 battle theme, and you just Google these. And then, Final Fantasy 9, again, goes back to the classic of da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and then it goes into the separate melody. 7 was it is the most popular Final Fantasy game because it was the most heavily marketed in the States. I mean, the amount of marketing and, money that went into making the game as popular as it did cannot be understated back in 97. Which is really why it got so popular. I mean, it brought the idea of the JRPG to the Western audience, because up to that point, yeah, games like Final Fantasy VI, games like Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest or Breath of Fire or, any of these other things I'm talking about, like, or Chrono Trigger. Well, I don't know. Obviously Chrono Trigger came out before 7, but all these things, they were out there and they were certainly popular, but 7 is what told Japan, like, oh, crap. People in America and Europe will buy JRPGs if we make them, based on the popularity of 7. And 7 is, I talked about the old guard and the new guard. 7 is really like, 6 was the last game really made by the old guard. 7 is when, the designers sort of moved on to, the old guard sort of moved on to different projects and started doing different things. And then the new guard came in. I mean, the most famous, quote unquote, of the new guard is, the character designers for Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 10, Tetsuya Nomura, who's obviously far more famous for the Kingdom Hearts series. That's his brainchild. But before, he just designed characters. There's a reason why Cloud and Squall and Waka and Tidus and are all in Kingdom Hearts. I mean, Vivi was so popular from 9 that he even got a cameo into Kingdom Hearts, even though it wasn't a character Nomura designed. If I remember, Setzer from Final Fantasy VI is the first character Nomura ever designed for the series, which is why Setzer makes it in Kingdom Hearts 2. But again, there's Cypher, and then there's Rajin and Fujin. Is there anyone else? There's Selphie. I mean, all these characters that he designed are brought into the Kingdom Hearts verse. Aeris, Yuffie, yada yada. You get the point. Sephiroth. And if you notice, the characters in this game do not look like the characters in, or at least the designs, are not reminiscent of the designs from 7, 8, and 10 or Kingdom Hearts, because these characters were not designed by Nomura. They were, well, if you go back and read, you can see who did design the characters on the credit screen. I've never actually thought about it or bothered to look it up. Either way, 9 was the last game. I say 6 was the last game the old guard worked on. 9 was sort of a mix of the old guard and the new guard of the Final Fantasy series. You know, every game past 9 has been made by the quote-unquote new guard. I'm not going to say that's why the games have been more contentious, because, I mean, I think that's just design choices, but because you could certainly make the argument that the Final Fantasy series was fairly stale for the first, 6 installments. I mean, they were all very samey. At the very least, you can say that. I think this is about to end, actually. Oh, well. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to me ramble. I hope you had a good time, and goodbye. I think it's about to be over. Okay, goodbye.